Hello, everybody. My name is Brian. I'm an alcoholic. Appreciate seeing everyone here tonight. I appreciate Steve and Nori and those folks who met me for a bite to eat before coming in. Definitely made me feel welcomed, and this is certainly the furthest I have ever gone to share my story. My sobriety date's March 3rd, 2004. My home group is Beginners and Winners down in Wrightsville Beach. We meet on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock if you're ever in the area. And my sponsor is Dale S., who has been a true blessing in my life. I've actually come up here a couple times in the past with him to hear him speak. And I can remember when I was about probably 9 or 10 months sober and seeing him up here sharing his story and thinking to myself, man, that's quite a privilege, to be called on to go out of town to share your experience, strength, and hope. And I really admired him, still do, but really admired seeing him up here. And you'd have told me 10 years ago when I was bartending in any bar that would allow me to drink on the job that the highlight of my week would be traveling a little less than 3 hours to share my story of alcoholism to a group of who were once strangers, now friends. I'd have laughed at you and bought you a drink. I don't know. I guess my story is very similar to most everybody in here. We all have our common traits, and I go back to my childhood, and I look at some of the themes that I've heard other alcoholics share over the years that I can relate to as well. My folks were loving. I was born in Illinois, and little small town. Everyone always says, "Were you born in Chicago?" And I'm like, yeah, there's more to Illinois than Chicago. I was about 2 hours south in a small town called Sterling Rock Falls, milling community, farming community. I am a lifelong Chicago Cubs fan, which makes for a tough life. We moved down to Florida when I was 5. The mill had closed, and there wasn't a whole lot of work, and my father got a job with a blooming liquor and wine distributor it's called Carbo at the time. It's now called Southern Wine and Spirits, and he has been with them 30 plus years. We'll get into that a little bit more later on in my story. My folks split up when I was about 6, and got used to the idea of seeing Dad every other weekend and whatnot. At that time, baseball was my thing. I would say that was my first addiction when I look back in life. I was pretty good at playing. I was a lefty, pitched a little bit, and so that was always a place where I felt comfortable. I've said before, I think the 3 places that I've truly felt comfortable in my life were on a pitching mound, a bar stool, or an AA meeting. And when I was a kid, I loved playing ball. I would look forward to it. I would obsess over it. Same way I would eventually obsess over drinking alcohol. Put on a lot of weight when I was young. I'd say for about ages 7 to 11, I was kind of the chubby kid in class, and as a result, my insecurities kind of built up. Kids, when you're young, you have a tendency of saying things to other kids that seem to stick. Kids kind of call it as they see it, and I was the brunt end of a lot of overweight jokes, and so it left me feeling fairly insecure and not certain on where I belonged. We moved from Florida back up to Illinois when I was 10. And that was a challenging move for me because I went from seeing my dad every other weekend to seeing him a couple weeks over the summer. He remarried right before I turned 13, and that was the first time I drank at his wedding. That perfect scene that I'm sure several people in this room have been in before. There's several of us kids that are definitely not old enough to drink yet, but definitely wanting to be part of the good time, and you get together I got together with a couple of my cousins, and we plotted a way to get a little bit of champagne, and that was pretty good, so we get a little bit more, and before you know it, out there dancing on the dance floor, and it was man, it was a dream come true. I had a great time that day. There were some good times in my drinking. Unfortunately, most of them were at the beginning and not the end. The little honeymoon type thing, it was kind of a shabby honeymoon. I kind of feel bad for my dad. And his wife Terry, we went back to the Rock River, which is in Illinois, and just kind of camped out for the weekend. And I had befriended this young lady. She was probably 18, 19 years old, and she would slide me drinks, and I'd oblige to drinking them. They had Bloody Marys, and that night I was sleeping with my dad and his new bride in the tent, and I had to get sick, and I couldn't figure out how to get the tent open. And so I'm hitting at my dad, and we had ate corn on the cob that day, and I'll just leave it at that. It was not a pretty scene. I didn't drink again for several years. I had a cousin up in West Virginia who was kind of my guy as far as experiencing my first with. Had that first 40 ounce, that first dip of tobacco, several different things, and I always admired him when I was young because he seemed so confident. He had a lot of friends, and again, he was kind of a rebel. So I always admired him in the way he worked, but I could drink more than he could, and I took a little bit of pride in that. When he was the one over getting sick behind the shed, and I was sitting there laughing at him, that felt good to me. I felt this false sense of superiority, but at the same time, when you're 14, 15 years old, and you're handling your drink, you kind of pick on the other guy, and before you know it, it gives you a place to kind of plant your feet and say, okay, maybe this is a place where I can make a stand. We moved down to North Carolina in 1990, and I hoped to fall back on baseball as I always had throughout my life. Again, that was a place where I always fit in, and I always felt like I belonged, and I could always make friends. And so I joined the high school team and did okay with that. I've really worked through this as far as when I did my steps, especially in the fourth and fifth. The idea of feeling that I was an outsider. There were a lot of kids who had played ball their whole lives together, and I came in as the outsider. I really felt that kind of impacted my playing time a little bit. I felt I could play just as good as a lot of those other guys, but my dad wasn't out there rubbing elbows with the coach on the fence and things like that. And I got a burning resentment about that. It was the first time that I had saw those kind of politics in my life, and little did I know I'd see those kind of politics again, time and time again in life. That was the first time it left a bad taste in my mouth, and I said, the heck with it, I'm going to quit playing ball. Then I needed a place to occupy my time. I had a couple buddies who had already quit playing ball, and they were more than welcome to welcome me over to the keg. And so we're standing around the keg and we're drinking together, and all of a sudden I found a place for me to fit in that wasn't on the baseball field. Took to drinking liquor, took to skipping school, and the Friday, Saturday night drinking in high school became Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then you tack Sunday on. And by my senior year, I was drinking pretty much most nights. Had this, what I thought was a slick way of sneaking out my window. Come to find out years later, I wasn't too sneaky at all. My parents knew that I was heading out. My mother did, but she kind of let me go. As long as I wasn't having the sheriff bring me home or anything like that, and as long as I wasn't out driving, she didn't mind if I was having a few drinks. I actually had a little garage type shed thing in the back where we called it the shack, and if we were back there having some drinks, she'd let us because her justification was we weren't on the road drinking and driving. I don't hold that against her, but I look at it, and I've got a 17-month-old son at home now, and through the generations we hope to get a little bit better each time, and I think I will handle things a little differently with my son. But she was doing what felt right to her, and I didn't mind. at that age. I was very happy to have a place where I could get intoxicated and not get in trouble. Graduated high school and was set up to go to UNCW. Got arrested for the first time that summer before going to college. Dumb luck, I thought. This is a story of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'll say I got caught with a bag of weed. It was the first time I'd ever bought a bag of weed. You would think that a person would say, okay, maybe this isn't the right decision for me, but it didn't slow me down, and that was kind of the story of a decade for me. Had a couple neighborhood buddies who had started cooking at the restaurant Hooters in town, and I heard a couple oohs out there. Yeah, that's the place where my story really took off, unfortunately. College was a lot of freedom, and I did not know how to handle that freedom. I didn't have someone harping at me for not being in an 8 o'clock class. I wasn't going to be in that 8 o'clock class. It was more important for me to enjoy the social life and go out and have a few after getting off work at 12:30, more than a few, and going to someone's house and playing cards till 3:30, 4 in the morning, and telling myself in the back of my head, I'm going to make it to class at 8, and believing it. For the longest time, I played that game with myself of saying something and genuinely believing that it was going to follow through. But rarely did it happen. My first semester of college, I think I had a .41 GPA when it was said and done, and I'm not necessarily proud of that, but that's the way it was. I got my first DUI in 1998, and it was kind of wild how it worked out. I wanted to keep it from my mother. God, the last thing I wanted her to know was that I was getting in more trouble with the law, and thought I had done a pretty good job of it. Acquired my own lawyer and had things set up with court dates and whatnot, and I had a continuance, so I thought one week, and never forget this. I'm laying in bed on a Saturday. I'd like to say morning, probably Saturday afternoon, and all of a sudden my little sister, who was probably 7 at the time, came running into my bedroom. Bubby, there's a policeman here for you. And I'm shaking the cobwebs and like, what? Walk out there, and sure enough, in the living room, there's an officer, and there's my mom with kind of this deer in headlight look on her face, and my little sister's at my legs wondering what's going up. And he said, well, I got a warrant for your arrest. You missed a court date. And I was like, oh, sir, that should have been continued. He gets on his paperwork, makes some calls, and he's like, you're right, I apologize. Sorry for any inconvenience. Oh, God. Never forget that. Never forget. But, of course, that wasn't my fault. That was his fault. So there was another one of those resentments. And so my mom's in the loop on what's going on, and I'm finding that it's harder to hide, and she's getting a little more particular about my drinking. She's not too keen to the idea of me drinking at home anymore. And, still not quite 21 at the time. And of course, if I can't drink at home, why am I going to stay at home? So I move out for the first time. Got my second DUI in 2000. Had just broken up with a girlfriend, and figured I still needed to sow my oats. I had plenty that I needed to do, and my buddies and I went down to Mardi Gras, and we had a big time down there, and got back, and I was doing a few things where I was bringing in an income that wasn't exactly taxable at the time, and I bought myself this nice big blue Cadillac, and I'm leaving the bowling alley on a Monday night. Monday night bowling, I probably got more intoxicated than I did on a Saturday night downtown at the bars. Something about that restaurant league on Monday nights. You get a bunch of us guys in there and challenge each other to take shots so you could roll a strike and leave the bowling alley. And I actually had someone offer to take my keys that night, but that unfortunately wasn't an option for me back in those days. A couple people actually offered that night. And my group of friends, I've talked to my sister, and I'm so proud of her. I really think she learned through her big brother's mistakes. But my group of friends, we didn't do the designated driver. We didn't know what that was all about. It was whoever had a license was driving that night, And anyway, I get pulled over for my second DUI. I had some other things in my vehicle that evening, and all of a sudden, I was wishing I hadn't broke up with that girlfriend. I was wanting a little bit of company because I was feeling pretty bad about myself. Called my mom to get me out, and she did. And Mom, bless her, she always had that shoulder for me to lean on when I'd screw up. She had a friend who had a husband that was going to AA, and I was not ready to get sober, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I was ready to see my mother feel better, and I was ready to make accommodations for the court and for the judge. I went to my first AA meeting in 2000, and I actually went to probably 3 or 4 meetings, the same meeting, because I thought that was the only meeting. Wilmington has 140 plus meetings, but I thought it just met on Wednesday night at the Catholic Church, and I thought the guy who was chairing that month was the president of AA. And I wasn't hearing suggestions like get a sponsor, work the steps or whatnot, because I had no intentions to. I'm sure those things were said, and I'm sure they were said at every meeting, but I certainly didn't hear them at that time. I stayed dry for 54 days. I remember that because I was keeping a journal at the time, because it was very hard for me to not drink, because I really wanted to. And the old adage of people, places, and things, I was still doing the same things with the same people, and it was inevitable that one day I'd drink. And sure enough, I was down at Wrightsville Beach one night. Me and a fella I was with who was trying to be supportive of me, we got a 6-pack of O'Doul's. And we had a 6-pack of O'Doul's and a pack of Newports, and we were ready for the night. And I get down there, and those O'Doul's are gone in 40 minutes. And we're chain smoking Newports, and we're watching everybody else get drunk. And all of a sudden, I got that itch, and it darn well made it through the majority of the night. It was probably 3 or 4 in the morning, and I opened up the crisper in the refrigerator because I knew you don't always sit your alcohol out where it can be seen. Sometimes you got to hide some, and lo and behold, there was a 5th of rum. And my buddy and I were on the rooftop of that house dancing, chugging rum. By the time it was said and done, I fell off that roof that night and got home, and I had a corner of a pint of bourbon just waiting for me because I knew I was going to drink again. I wasn't going to AA to get sober at that time. I was going to ease my mother's mind. I drank that bourbon, and I was out on the couch. For those couple months that I wasn't drinking, I had gotten the pattern of going to church with my mom on Sunday. She liked that. And this was a Sunday, and I'm passed out on the couch, and she's calling me, and I'm not answering because I sure as heck didn't want to talk to her. She could always pick up how I was feeling, and she was really proud that I hadn't been drinking. She ended up coming by the house, and I don't remember much of it, but I do remember her kind of shaking my arm and looking up, seeing her, and then just turning back over and going to sleep. While she was at my apartment that day, she wrote a little something for me, and before I'm done speaking tonight, I'd like to share it with you guys. I was right back on the train. It was as if I had not missed a beat. I would try to make rules for myself at that time. I won't take shots. I won't drink liquor during the week. I'll study first, and I make all these rules, but I'd never follow through. I might follow through, for a half a week or so, but eventually I was going to drink the way I wanted to drink, and the situation would be just right. I could create a reason to drink the way I wanted to drink. Somehow, some way, made it through my bachelor's degree, and in December of 2002, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology and a minor in creative writing. I look back at that psychology, and I think I was trying to figure my darn self out. Creative writing, I always thought was kind of cool. I always felt I needed to be high to write anything that was worth a hoot, but I found out that that's not the case. That January, my mother took her life, and my world changed. Everything changed real quick. I already qualified for this program by that point, but I tell you, when she was gone, it was in the back of my mind, it was my free pass to drink how I wanted to drink. I didn't feel that there was anybody out there who could tell me that I didn't have a reason to get drunk. And that's what I did. That's what I did for about 6 months. I bartended at 3 different bars. Picked up a couple of shifts at Hooters every once in a while, and yeah, I was not in a good place. I tried to occupy myself and stay busy because I didn't want to have time to think. I didn't want to try to process what had gone on. I got my 3rd DUI that June, and that sucked. Long and short of that, it was not a happy time for me, but it was part of what I needed to eventually hit my bottom. I was laying up in the jailhouse. It was when it was still in downtown Wilmington, and I had absolutely no idea who to call. None. I had always counted on Mom. She was that shoulder for me to lean on when I'd screw up. Unconditional love, and without her there, I didn't know what direction to go. Laid up there for about 3 days until finally I got up the goal to call my stepfather. And he and I had never really been that close. We tried to bond a little bit after my mother passed, but it was really rocky, especially with my drinking. And he came and he picked me up. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he probably saw how shabby I looked, and he said, "You'll be all right. You're going to get through this and things will be fine." And I will always have a debt of gratitude to him for that moment. I didn't drink for 2 weeks. Went by the church, sat down with the pastor, and I kind of wanted to stop, but I didn't necessarily know how to stop drinking. It was what I knew. It was what I had come to be familiar with, and I'm bartending, so I have to make an income, and that kind of goes hand in hand with drinking, and the rationalizations just kept coming and coming, and so I kept drinking for several months. That October, I was on my orange scooter, which I had acquired that August, and I was going down Rogersville Avenue in Wilmington. It's a real windy road, and as I was coming around one of the turns, a car was coming the other way, and it was over in my lane. So I get to the side of the road and hug it as close as I could, and I hit a gravel patch and rolled that scooter, and it was pretty banged up, laying on the side of the road, kind of going into shock. And lo and behold, one of my buddies comes driving by. He looks at me like, "B, you okay?" Of course, me. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. That old word, fine. And then kind of came to my senses a little bit when I looked at that scooter and realized I wouldn't be driving it home. And I said, "No, I'm not good. I'm not good. Can you give me a ride?" And he did. He brought me back to my house, and I called my roommate and asked her to bring me home a half gallon. And I got in the bathtub and worked some of the gravel out of the wounds, and drank the rest of the beer we had in the house. And she brought home that half gallon, and I'm sitting there slow sipping it and watching the ball game. It was 2003, and I don't know if there's any baseball fans in here, but the Chicago Cubs were playing the Florida Marlins in the playoffs. It was the infamous Bartman season. And it wasn't the Bartman game. It was a game before, and I'm watching the Cubs play, and I'm drinking, and the drinking's just not doing it for me. And I look down at this half gallon, and I just start crying, start bawling, and I brought about half of it over the sink and poured it out, and that was my last drink. Which, if you were listening closely, that means that I didn't drink during the Bartman play when the Cubs lost their chance to go to the World Series, which I'm pretty proud of. That's not my sobriety date, unfortunately. There were a few other things that were still going on because I just thought if I quit drinking, then everything would be fine. Hadn't found AA yet at that time. Hadn't really found the solution. I got arrested for the last time March 2nd, 2004, and as they were, I got to kind of share this story. It's worth hearing. I was on that orange scooter, and I was heading home from that dang bowling alley. I don't bowl anymore, y'all. I just I got in way too much trouble at the bowling alley. And I'm heading home, and I don't know. I was under the mindset you don't get pulled over on a scooter. You're already on the scooter. Cut a guy some slack, and I see the blue lights, and I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. And pulled me over, and talked to me for a while. Said, how many cc's is this thing? You were going a little quick. And I didn't know for sure. I knew it was under 50, so I could legally drive it, but I didn't know exactly how much. And he said, well, lift the seat. Usually it says underneath there. Yeah, I had some things underneath the seat, and I'm sure you could probably see that in my eyes when he said it. And I said, well, sir, I've got some personals under there. I'd rather not. Oh, no problem, Mr. Williamson. We'll just call and get a warrant, and we'll take care of that. So that was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I ride downtown in the back of that car that night. Last time I've been in the back of a police car, I like to say. And it was a full moon. And I looked up, and I knew something was getting ready to change. Something was getting ready to change. We got downtown, and nowadays they got that fancy computer to do your fingerprints on. Back when I first got arrested, I had to do the old thumb. Now they got this big computer, and I'm standing there in front of that, and the booking officer is taking care of me, and there's a poster above the computer that says, "Want help? Need to change? Call." And it was a drug treatment court in New Hanover County. Called them the next day, and I got involved with a program called Drug Court, which was a big instrument in saving my life. I had hit my bottom at that time. And it wasn't the last arrest. It wasn't anything legal. Emotionally, I was shot. I didn't have anything to offer emotionally, and I didn't know what direction to go, and I didn't want to take my life, but I didn't know what to do. You're all right. You're all right. I spoke to a woman named Penny Craver, and Penny looked over my arrest history, which unfortunately was more pages than I'd like to admit, and all my charges were alcohol or drug related. So she said, "You're perfect for the program," and she brought me in. With that program, I was required to go to either AA or NA, and brown liquor always got me started. So AA was the perfect fit for me, and so I'm going to 4 or 5 meetings a week, and I got a curfew. Had to go in front of the judge every 2 weeks and check in, let him know how I was doing, had to do drug tests, and just really a stringent program, which I heard a lot of people complaining about that were in it with me. I was ready, so it was not a big issue for me. I was glad to be doing it. Didn't want to get a sponsor though. That wasn't my cup of tea. And so I'm about a month and a half in, and Miss Craver sets me down for our every 2 week meeting, and she says, "Brian, how are things going?" And, everything's fantastic. Things are moving along really well. And she's like, "That's great. I'm glad to hear. You got a home group?" No, don't have a home group yet, but I go to quite a few meetings. "Oh, that's good, Brian. That's good. You got a sponsor?" No, I don't think the sponsor thing's for me, Penny. And and she looked me dead in my eye, and she said, "Okay, all right, well, just so you know, if next time we get together and we talk, you don't have a sponsor, we'll go ahead and just set you up for a few weekends over at the Annex and let you think about it." And so I was looking for a sponsor. I had kind of kept my eyes open a little bit. I didn't talk a whole lot when I first got sober. I knew how to get drunk, but I didn't know how to get sober, so I didn't have much to share in meetings. And so I did a lot of listening, and there were a couple people that stood out to me. My grandfather is the best man I've known on this planet. And so I was looking for someone who was not my age, someone who was older, that I could offer the respect that they deserved. I think if I would have got someone who was my age at that time, my ego was way too big, and I would have just not listened to a thing they had to say. There was this guy who was just really jovial and seemed to always take over the room. great sense of humor. And when he spoke, he didn't speak about the problem, he spoke about the solution. And that was very important to me. And so I swallowed that apple that was in my throat. And I went up to him after a meeting and I asked him if he'd be my sponsor. And it was hard for me to do. Man, it was hard. I no one raised their hand as newcomers in this room, so I'm sure everyone's had that experience. But I just didn't know how to ask another man for help. He sized me up and he said, I don't know. We'll have to see. And so I'm like, what does that mean? And he said, how about you write out your drinking history, and next time you see me at a meeting, give it to me. And I'm still thinking, well, you didn't give me a yes or a no. What's happening here? And so I said, okay, you got it, no problem. I left that conversation a little bit confused, but I did what he asked. And I went home and I wrote out my drinking history, kind of chronologically. I'm a creative writing minor, so I made it look real fancy and all that. And next time I saw him at a meeting, probably that next night or the following night, I gave it to him. And I realized now that he was checking to see how serious I was. I'm sure he had many people who he had made that same request to, never got back to him because they didn't want to do any work. And as soon as I gave that to him, he was on board. And I started doing step work. And that made a world of difference for me. The fellowship is fantastic. And I am very grateful for the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I say, it's one of the few places in this world where I can feel truly comfortable and just be myself. But it was the 12 steps that have kept me clean and sober. And he walked me through the book. We read the book together, which caught me off guard a little bit at first. I do we really need to do all this? Can't we just kind of get through these 12 steps and I'm good and I roll on? And that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. We did them in order, the way they're supposed to be. And things were changing. Things were changing. One moment that always sticks out to me, and I share it when I speak sometimes, is that whole idea of honesty. My definition of honesty hit me was I had to quit I chose to quit my bartending jobs and some of the other things I was doing when I finally got sober. Some people have been able to work in the bar business and stay sober. My hat's off to them. I don't think I could pull that off. I got a job at a place in Wilmington called Jungle Rapids. I don't know if anybody's familiar. It's go-karts and putt-putt golf and arcade and things of that nature. And I got a buddy there who used to DJ at a club I bartended at. He was the general manager at Jungle Rapids. He said, I can get you on as an assistant manager, Brian. And I swallowed that piece of humble pie. And I said, that sounds great. So I go in there and I got my walkie-talkie and I got my name tag and my collared shirt. And I needed that job. Didn't want it, but I needed that job. That job did so much for me as far as humbling me down and bringing me back to earth. I'd see guys I went to high school with come in with their families, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what have I done with the past 10 years? Anyway, there was a manager that I used to close with, and every night at the end of the shift, he would go in the Good Humor ice cream cooler, pull him out an ice cream and say, well, that was a good shift. And he'd walk off and eat the ice cream. And I watched him do it a couple times, and I was like, I like those Oreo ice creams. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to get me one too. And I started taking me an ice cream at the end of every shift. Not paying for it. That wasn't part of my contract. You you get $6.25 an hour and an ice cream. No, that wasn't the case. In doing the step work, some things started to change in me, and I started to think about things a little bit different. And I'll never forget getting ready to go into that Good Humor ice cream cooler one night and pulling my hand back as if I had just got burnt and saying, "That's not mine. That is not mine." And I promise you, that was new behavior for me at that time. I was one who would take what I could get, and then I'd take a little bit more, and that Friday when I got my paycheck, miserable paycheck, but a paycheck. When I got it, I rang up $20 in petty cash and put it in the drawer, and I felt like $1 million. That feeling you get from doing the next right thing. And I kept moving along in the program, and came with Dale. Heard him share here, like I say, when I was about 8 or 9 months sober, and I remember Steve Keys. I got my 9-month chip. And I was feeling like I was the man, Went up there, people were clapping, and I'm smiling, and everything's good. And I go back and I sit in my seat, and I'm sitting next to Steve, and Steve leans over to me real soft, like clapping his hand. He said, "Isn't it great to hear all these people applaud for what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous does?" I was like, "Whoo!" They're not applauding for me, and that was good. That was good. I needed to hear that. Got an opportunity to go back to school when I was about 1.5 years sober, and work on a master's degree in social work. Got my driver's license back after 7 years of not having it. Went down to the DMV, had the hearing, and they found me worthy, and I realized driving was a privilege. I didn't think of it that way when I was out there cascading around and not worrying about anyone's safety. But I definitely take driving as a privilege. I haven't got any tickets yet, but I did get one of those traffic light tickets, where the stoplight tickets. And it was actually kind of funny because you can look it up online and you can watch it to make sure it really happened, and it really happened. Yeah. Not to say I want to do it all the time, but it was kind of humorous. Met my wife in graduate school, and she knew that I was sober, and I was very insecure about that at first. I didn't know how to form a relationship. And I sure as heck didn't know how to attempt a relationship without a few drinks. But she was patient with me. And there was a point in time when I had been dating her for about 1 year where I thought I was going to be able to go and get my driver's license. And I went into the DMV. It was 1 year after my final court date had been completed. I went into the DMV, excited, all these plans and expectations of what it was going to be like to drive again. And the woman printed out a piece of paper, handed me, said, "All right, Mr. Williamson, we'll see you in 1 year." And it just shot me down. Man, it shot me down. That was one of 3 moments that I'm going to share right now that were challenged for me to where I thought I was going to take a drink. I was just really sunk in that moment. And she came and she picked me up. And she took me out to shoot some pool, and we hung out that day. We prayed together that day, and I knew that day that she was going to be the woman that I was going to spend the rest of my life with, because she had to carry my sorry tale around, and she never complained about it. She just accepted it, which was pretty amazing to me. We got married in, I better get this one right, 2005, and. No, that's wrong. We got married in 2007 after we graduated, and we went out on a Carnival cruise, and Carnival's kind of got a bad rep right now, don't they? I saw a few people go, "Ooh." I thought everybody on that ship had a drink. I really did. I was 3 years sober at the time, and the first couple of days I'm just high off being married, and that whole situation. But as that was wearing off a little bit, again I'm looking around and I'm saying, God, everybody here's got a drink but me, and I start to feel kind of bad for myself, and I start to think I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, and these ideas start creeping in my head. Thankfully, I paid attention to the little Miss Alette thing, and I knew they had the Friends of Bill W. meeting every night at 5 o'clock. It wasn't until the 4th day we were on that cruise that I actually said, you know what, I looked at my wife and said, before dinner, I'm going to go check out this meeting, with all expectations that I'd walk in there and be the only person. And I was at first. I went in, and they had us in this little closet, And I was the only person there. I'm thinking to myself, yep, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. And so I'll tell you, I'm going to go get a coffee drink, and I'm going to come back and see what's happening. And when I got back, there were 3 women in there. And one of them had 23 years sobriety. The other one had 18, and then another woman had relapsed out on the boat. And all of a sudden, my problems weren't that big. You know, all of a sudden, it wasn't poor Brian. All of a sudden, it was the fellowship trying to help build this woman's strength up again, so her relapse didn't have to extend on. And taking a genuine concern in this woman's life who I had never met before. And it's amazing to see what transformations happen as a result of working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Some of the men's opportunities that I have had have just been nothing short of incredible. A few of them took longer than I wanted them to, some of those financial amends, but they came around. And you know, again, it's that feeling of doing the next right thing that I kind of get high off today. I got a job when I graduated from UNCW at the Wilmington Treatment Center, and I worked there as a counselor for 3.5 years. And again, Dale's getting a lot of plugs tonight, and it's not just because he drove me up here. Dale told me, he said, "Brian, remember, that's your job, that's not your recovery." And that was a valuable piece of information for me to take, because in there I'm still around the disease of alcoholism and the sickness a lot. You know, you got people who are really early into things and maybe not even wanting to change, and it is very vital for me to get to an AA meeting and hear gratitude for what sobriety has done in people's lives. Today I got to share a little bit about, you know, what has happened. I got a 17-month-old son, and he's awesome. God, he's so awesome. And it's my goal for him never to see me drink. My father, who has been working with the biggest liquor and wine distributor in Central Florida for 30 plus years, has a great deal of respect for me that I'm not drinking one day at a time. And our relationship is better than it's ever been. When I turned 21, he gave me a Jägermeister hat and a Jim Beam golf bag, and it's different now. It's different. We don't have to just rely on a couple mixed drinks to try to connect. We can talk like two men. I get the opportunity to teach at UNCW. I taught a little bit at the community college, and that wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't supposed to happen for me. I had written myself off from being able to do a lot of things due to my legal history, and God has had another plan for my life, and I'm appreciative for that. I'm making a living amends every day to my mother, and what I wanted to share was what she wrote that day when she came over, and I had can't really call it a relapse because I was just dry, you know. But I was laying on that couch. My roommate had a plant that kind of sat in between the living room and the kitchen, and the plant had a lot of dead leaves on it. And while my mother was there, she picked all the dead leaves off the plant, and she laid them on the floor in front of it. And so when I eventually come to, I look over and I see all these leaves, and I see this note. 5/23/2000, 6:30 p.m. Brian, I hope Heidi doesn't mind that I took all of the dead leaves off of her plant so it could continue to be strong and grow in a healthy way. I hope you don't mind that I left the dead leaves on the floor for you to pick up, hoping to teach you. You have to shed your dead leaves, your old habits, in order to continue to be strong and grow in a healthy way. Please don't be afraid to pick up these dead leaves and throw them away. Stop hurting yourself. You have a beautiful blossom just waiting to come out if you will water it and care for it properly. Please don't water this plant with tears of pity, but instead with tears of joy. Please pick up what has fallen so that everyone can enjoy looking at the beauty, especially you. Love always, Mom. It says, P.S. I watered the plant for you while I was here. And she did. You know, she did. This is more important than any material thing I own. And, you know, I keep it in this special plastic thing. It's It's the most important thing I have. And on those days where it's difficult to maybe do it for Brian, I've got so many different reasons to stay sober today, and I'm appreciative of that. And I'm appreciative of you guys taking a little bit of time out of your Thursday night and listening to my story. So, thank you.